Hi guys, welcome to lesson 6, the simultaneous solution. So we've talked about one way we can record our acoustic guitar vocal, all right? We talked about the safety option, all right? How to record for the most safety, the most options further down the road in the mixing phase. Now we're talking about that authenticity option, all right? We talked about if you want a more organic sound, how do we achieve that? And we achieve that by recording both instruments at the same time, both the vocal and the acoustic guitar at the same time. So we will have a slightly different setup in order to do that. So if you missed the other lessons, definitely go back and watch them. The other recording lessons about the safety option, right? Even if you want the authentic, organic option of recording, please go back and watch those other videos and make sure that you understand all of those principles that we're putting together, because they really come into play when we are doing this other setup that's gonna give us a slightly different sound. The advantages of the authentic setup, the recording for authenticity, is that we will get more of that kind of sound, right? That one take kind of sound where we're going to be essentially recording as if we were in a live situation, all right? You're in your local bar and you are singing and playing the way you always would at a live event. This is going to pick up your performance in that most natural way, all right? You're not recording separately, so you're not contriving anything in any way. The disadvantages, though, are you're going to have less options down the road. Now, we do our best here with the setup to give ourselves as many options as we can as we go further down into the mixing phase, but you are going to be limited, right? Where you're recording things together. Essentially, you're going to have bleed between these two microphones, and you're going to be recording on two different tracks, but on each track you're going to hear a little bit of the other instrument, all right? So on the guitar track you're going to hear a little bit of the vocal, all right? You can't completely avoid it. And on the vocal track you're going to hear a little bit of that guitar. You can't completely avoid it, all right? And that kind of limits you in places when you're looking at maybe adjusting your tone and your frequency. You have to take into effect those other sounds that are kind of bleeding into the mic. So as I said, it does kind of give you less options as you go down the road. That's the disadvantage. The advantage, of course, is you get a much more organic sound that you might be going for. So this is definitely one I advise for the more advanced mixing engineer, someone who's done this kind of thing a little bit before. Definitely take a look at this option. If you are brand new to this stuff, I wouldn't advise this option. I think it's going to be just a little bit too challenging for you. Not that I don't love a challenge and I want to challenge you, but I wouldn't advise going for this option straight out of the gate. I think you should give it a go with the two separate recordings, guitar, then your vocal, and then mix that and master it, and we'll go through all of that process. I think if you're brand new to this might just be a step too far for your first project, all right? So if you are brand new or relatively new to this whole process and recording and mixing, I would go for the safety option rather than this. But if you are more advanced, let's get cracking. Okay, before we start recording, what do we do first? What did we do in the last two lessons? We did our pre-check, all right? Remember our little flight pre-check, our recording pre-check. What do we need to do in order to make sure that we're not going to wreck our recording in the middle of the thing, all right? What do we need to do? We need to turn our phone off, take off jangly jewelry. We need to take off watches and remove ticking clocks and all of that stuff. Turn off the AC unit, all right? You'll notice here we've got an extra microphone, which means an XLR lead, all right? We've got an extra XLR lead here, which means more wires. Right, there's more stuff around us, so make sure that again your cables aren't crossing, and your audio cables and mains cables are definitely separate from each other, otherwise you might have a bit of an issue. All right, so be certain of that. So once we've done our pre-check for our recording, let's get into the setup here. All right, what's different? Well, let's start with what's the same. What is the same? We have the same microphone down here. This microphone is the MXL V67i that we used before, and we're looking at a very similar setup when it comes to the settings on the microphone. All right, we've got it on the bright setting again, because this microphone is going to be picking up the guitar, all right, in our setup. So we've got it on the bright setting again because MXL recommended that. We have rolled off the low end because we know we don't need it. And then we have that same XLR lead winding down and going into the audio interface, the audio box by PreSonus. All right, so that is going in there and it's very happy in there. Then we have this new mic. All right, so let's talk about the new microphone that is sitting right here in front of my face that we're going to be picking up vocals on. All right, so we're going to be picking up vocals right here. You'll be able to hear me now through that microphone. So the thing with this microphone is it's a dynamic microphone. What kind of microphone is it? Well, it's the Shure SM57, which is a very famous microphone. There's two very famous microphones from Shure. One of them is the SM57 and one of them is the SM58. The SM58 is the one you see all the time. All right, the SM58 is when you go to see your local band play live, when you go to see an open mic night down the road in your local bar, when you go to bingo on the weekend. If you do that, I don't do that, but you might do that. You'll see them using, more often than not, using an SM58. It's that one with the silver head on it. The reason it's used a lot is for its durability. There are literally, go on YouTube and search for it. There are literally videos out there of people dropping the thing from like 10 stories up, picking it up at the parking lot at the bottom and recording something, and it still works. The things are made to be indestructible. And the same with this. It's essentially the same innards between the two models. And so they're very durable, wonderful, but that's not really the reason we're using this mic today. The reason we're using this mic for the vocals is it picks up sound in a slightly different way to this mic. So right now you're actually hearing a lot of my voice on this microphone, even though I'm not really looking at it, okay? And you're not really hearing a lot of me through this because I'm not directly in front of it, okay? So this microphone picks up sound. They both have the same polar pattern, which means they both pick up sound the most directly in front of them, all right? So this mic is picking up sound right here. This is the max volume point is right here directly in front of it. And the same with this. If I'm directly in front of this dynamic microphone, then it's exactly the same. It's picking up the most volume right here, right in front of it. So now the difference is that this microphone picks up sound in a much sort of narrower band than this microphone. All right, so you can hear me quite a lot over this microphone, as I said. And that is because it's kind of picking up sound from all over. Even though the ideal position to pick up sound with this mic is right here in front of it, it's still picking up a lot of sound from elsewhere, from over here, right? This mic has a much narrower band, right, that it's actually picking things up from. So this mic is it picks up the most sound when you're right in front of it. Whereas I can kind of come down here and talk to the side of this microphone and you'd hear me pretty well, okay? Whereas if I talk to the side of this microphone, it's a lot quieter. All right, so that's the reason we're using this. But I talked about the whole bleed thing between the two microphones, about how you're going to hear some of the guitar in this microphone, even though we don't want it. And we're going to hear some of the vocal in this microphone, even though we don't want it. So in order to help cancel that out, we have this microphone with a very narrow spectrum here that's going to be hopefully just picking up a lot of my vocal and cutting off some of that guitar, right? So this is kind of the placement. And then when we talk about the MXL down here, the MXL is positioned in a way where it's going to cut off a lot of my vocal. If you think of the sound waves physically traveling. If I'm singing right here or talking as I am right now, right here, the sound waves are traveling slightly this way. out of my mouth, mainly directly in front of me, but they're going to be traveling slightly down here. And as you can see, the mic is going to have a hard time picking that up. This mic down here is going to have a hard time picking that up because the sound waves will travel this way, all right, and the mic is pointed that way. Okay, so you've got to think about your placement when you're setting up something like this. Think about your placement and think, how can you cut out the sound you don't want to be heard on this microphone, and the same thing with this microphone, all right? So that explains some of the placement. It explains why we're using a dynamic microphone up here, okay? So something to be aware of, because of that more narrow spectrum that we've got here. You want to be quite dead center with this microphone. If you sing and you're over here, it's not going to pick you up very well, and you're actually going to probably hear more of the vocal on this mic, and that's not what you want. So make sure when you're singing, set it up in the right way. Figure out, when you're playing, you might sing differently to when you're just sitting. So figure out where you're singing to, which direction, and stick this microphone directly in front, all right? And we want this quite close to us. In fact, with both microphones, we want them quite close to the sound source. Why do we want that? Well, because these microphones don't have brains like we do, all right? There is no way that this MXL mic knows that we only want to pick up the guitar in this mic, all right? It doesn't know that. Only we know that. So the way we kind of help it with that process is we have it a little bit closer to the guitar. Let me show you. So you remember how we had, I'll maybe talk into this one now, you remember how we had before we did that Beatles placement where the mic was roughly 12 inches away, right? We kind of used our elbow here on the 12th fret, and the mic was about here, further away. Well, now we are kind of halving that. We're looking at about 6 inches, okay? And that is in order to focus all of that sound for this microphone on the guitar and not pick up too much of my voice, all right? So it's a big thing. When we're recording 2 instruments at once like this, it's a big thing to look at how can you cancel out the other instrument, okay? So we were looking at the placement and how it's kind of tilted in this way to avoid too much of the vocal, and now we want to look at kind of concentrating that sound by bringing it a little bit further to the guitar, a bit closer to the guitar. So as we see here, it's in a similar position. Now I have it slightly tilted towards the sound hole. You might see there I have it tilted in its shock mount slightly towards the sound hole to bring a bit more of that body, all right? We are a little bit closer, and I don't want things to get too twangy, all right, as I would describe it. So I want to get a bit of that body still. So I'm just tilting it. I'm not putting it in front of the sound hole. I don't want it there, you see, because that's going to be too full-bodied and it's going to sound dingy. All right, so we want it still in front of that 12th fret, but we are tilting it slightly towards the sound hole to pick up a bit more body of that guitar. All right, so that's the placement there for the guitar, for the MXL on the guitar. For this Shure, we're, again, as I said, we're trying to cancel out as much of the guitar as possible. If you think about most of the sound waves out of this guitar are traveling out of here, aren't they? So they're, it's going to come out this way. If you think of the sound waves are going to kind of go this way in front of us. It's not going, they're not really going to get into this microphone very easily. Even if they travel this way, they're kind of going to go off that way rather than, there's no way of them getting around here. All right, and of course the setup of this dynamic mic is going to help. Okay, so something I should mention: a dynamic microphone doesn't need phantom power. Okay, so you won't need to do that. But in our example, we're using the PreSonus audio box that has 2 inputs, and it has its own setup where you can insert the phantom power, and it's only going to use it where it's needed. All right, so it's sending phantom power to this mic, but it's not sending anything to this mic. All right, they do that automatically for you, so you don't have to worry about that. You're not going to damage your microphone in any way. Okay, so the next thing is make sure you've got this pop filter. You will definitely need this, all right? As I said, we're going to be closer to the microphone, all right? We're bringing this sound source closer. We're bringing this sound source closer as well, so we can cancel them out in opposing microphones, all right? So because of that, you do not want to go without your pop filter, all right? In this case, I've actually got a windshield on the SM57, all right? And I've got a pop filter in front of that. So I just really don't want any plosives. I can always, if it dulls down the signal a bit, which it could, it's unlikely, but it could slightly, then I can always adjust that and bring the top end up a little bit. But I would rather that than having big plosives in my vocal and spoiling it with distortion, all right? So make sure that you have, you don't have to have the windshield here, but having a pop filter is absolutely essential in this kind of setup. Just because you're so close to this microphone, you really don't want to spoil your recording with distortion. Now, as for recording, as for like kind of that end of things where the computer is and everything, we have the audio interface is, both mics are actually set up very similarly, even though you will notice you'll get a lower signal, lower in volume from the dynamic microphone. That's just down to it has a smaller diaphragm. So the diaphragm is essentially the piece of the microphone that vibrates to send the audio signal down the microphone. And this is a large diaphragm condenser microphone. So it's got a diaphragm in there, maybe about this big. And if you have this mic, you can just hold it up to the light. You'll probably just see that diaphragm in there is about that big. When we look at this one, the diaphragm in there is like this big, all right? Which means it's going to produce a quieter signal. It also makes it more robust, makes it a great microphone for picking up very loud signals like drums and things like that, because it's a smaller diaphragm. It's able to vibrate faster and harder without breaking or being damaged in any way. So it's a great option for us. But you will just find the signal is just that little bit quieter than your signal here. So you'll have to kind of adjust that when you get there in the gain staging phase. Which is kind of the first bit of your mixing phase. So essentially in the DAW, in our software, we are recording 2 different tracks, all right? You are very welcome to try and record this on a single track, all right? If you wanted to just record this one shot on a single track, you could do that, but you would have to make sure that your levels going in are mixed. All right, so you'll have to make sure that your vocal is the volume you want it against your guitar as you're going in. So you'd have to kind of monitor that and listen to it, record a bit, listen back, record it, and da-da-da. What we're doing, though, to give us more options, because I want to give you as many options further down the road. As I said, this is a limiting kind of technique, but I want to show you a setup that's going to give you as many options as possible further down the road. So what we can do is we record on 2 separate tracks. We have, I've literally titled them vocal and guitar. All right, then we have 2 separate tracks. All right, and make sure you set the inputs on those tracks correctly. Otherwise, you'll double up on the same thing. You want them both to be mono recordings. All right, and you want to obviously set 1 as input 1 and 2 as input 2, all right? So whatever your setup is, whichever input you have going into your audio interface, make sure they line up, all right? And make sure you've got, for me, I believe my input 2, yes, my input 2 is my vocal. All right, so I've made sure that in the track, the vocal track that I've titled vocal, is set to the input number 2, all right? And you want to just make sure you've got those settings correct, all right? Otherwise, you'll record it and you won't be happy, all right? So we are recording on 2 separate tracks. That's going to give us lots of flexibility further down the road. Now let's talk about the headphones thing. Remember I talked about headphones in the last lesson when we were talking about vocals, why you should and shouldn't listen on your headphones. If you don't have a track to listen to, then you don't need your headphones on while recording. And and my advice is always to have one ear off and all of that. In this setup, do we need headphones while we're recording? In this setup, do we need headphones while we're recording? Well, the answer is no, we do not. What do we need headphones for? All right. Yes, as I said before, you want to record a bit. You want to listen to it back. You want to record a bit again. You want to listen to it back. You want to make sure that you're very happy with your guitar tone and your vocal tone, the way you're picking everything up, and that there's not too much bleed between the two microphones, all right? You want to be sure of all of that stuff, and definitely record a bit, play it back, record a bit, play it back, adjust things as you go. Do that as many times as you feel necessary, and make sure that you're really comfortable and you really like the sound you're hearing before you actually go for your take. However, there is no reason, once you're happy with that and you've got all those settings correct and you've got your mics in the position that you like and everything feels good and sounds good, when you actually go for your take, there is no reason that you need headphones on. You know why? Because you can hear your guitar in your room the same way you always do when you're sitting playing on the couch or perhaps at the end of your bed, all right? So you can, there is no reason, you can hear your voice in the same way as you always do. It's bouncing off the walls, it's vibrating in your head and all of this, so you can hear everything as you always would. There is no reason why you need to monitor anything in your headphones, all right? All it's going to do is distract you and cause you to play differently or cause you to sing differently, and you'll only end up doing more takes. So my advice in this scenario is to make sure you're happy with your sound and your recording setup, all right? Listen to it back a few times to be sure, and then when you go for a take or your several takes that you might end up doing, all right, make sure that your headphones are not on your head. Put your headphones away, put them over there, all right? And you know, they can be used, they can wait for you once we've done a great take and we want to listen back to it and check all those levels and check that, you know, our tone sounds good and the dynamics sound good and things are being picked up in a nice way, all right? But that's, you know, check after you've recorded. You don't need to be monitoring anything while you're recording because you can hear everything in the room. Okay, so there are still the same things that we talked about in the other lessons, all right? So we were talking about vocals, we talked about sibilants, and we talked about plosives, and we said about the pop filter here. We also talked about the proximity effect. Now, the proximity effect happens even with a dynamic microphone, which is why you can kind of see I've got this pop filter slightly further away, right? I could have the pop filter right up close. I'm not sure if you can see from that angle, but there is a good inch and a half or something between the end of the microphone and my pop filter, all right? And even, you know, there's a little bit of space given by this windshield as well, all right? And the reason for that is that if I get very close to this microphone, move that out the way. If I'm here, you get a very different sound. And it's partly because of the proximity effect, also because the windshield is kind of diffusing my voice in a strange way, all right? But if I'm here, you end up with a very odd sound, all right? And if I move slightly, things change very dramatically. If I just move there, suddenly things are very different to when I'm here, all right? So you never want to be this close to your microphone, right? Even with this dynamic microphone that works in a slightly different way, you want to be further away. So if you set up a pop filter in the same way we did before, we kind of blocked ourselves off using the pop filter, all right? I can now not get any closer than this. So I'm still at an okay distance away from my microphone, okay? So I can't get any closer, no matter how carried away I get, no matter how much I want to talk and kiss the microphone, all right? I can't get any closer than that, which is really going to help with that proximity effect. With the sibilants, how do we avoid sibilants? Well, we can avoid it in similar ways. We can slightly tilt the microphone if we need to. But I would advise, in this scenario, find the best position. Your priority is to cancel out, you know, don't pick up too much guitar on this mic. Sorry, the other way around. Don't pick up too much guitar on this mic, and don't pick up too many vocals on this mic. That is your priority here. And then, of course, to make those instruments sound great on each microphone. I wouldn't worry too much about the sibilance, because you know you can fix it afterwards. I know I hate saying that, but you can fix it a little bit afterwards, and you shouldn't have too much of an issue with this kind of microphone. Sibilance is something that very often gets picked up more on a condenser style microphone, a large diaphragm condenser like one of these. It's not such a problem on these little dynamic microphones with a much smaller diaphragm. So you can do slight things. As I said, you can, you know, adjust the tone by moving the mic slightly, but I wouldn't go too far. I wouldn't do too much. I would have a look at fixing that a little bit afterwards if necessary. All right, so this is our setup, and we're pretty much good to go. I'm going to go ahead and record a little bit just to show you how it can sound. And as we move down the road, I will be following the safety option, all right, and we'll be going with those recordings that we made. But you can still follow along. If you've recorded in this fashion, it's going to be very similar as we go further through the course. The steps are all going to be the same. You've just got to keep in the back of your mind that, you know, any adjustments you make, are you increasing that background sound of the guitar or of the vocal? So, for example, if we'll be doing all different sections on how we can enhance the sound of our guitar. Okay, so when we do those enhancements, we want to make sure that in the background we're not picking up, you know, we're not bringing in more of that vocal that got picked up kind of by accident. All right, so you've just got to keep those sort of things in the back of your mind, but essentially all the steps are going to be the same, so you can still follow along. If you want to record this way, go for it. I do encourage you. It's, you know, it's a great way to get a fantastic performance, but do make sure that when it comes to those enhancements, you have that in the back of your mind. You know, just remember that you have recorded it in a slightly different way, and it's not going to be as clean as the safety option. All right, but all the steps are going to be the same, so you can definitely follow along for the rest of the course. So it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm going to get recording. Now up on the second floor, I kiss you till you can't take no more. Party like we've done this before. Turn off the lights, what else is this beat for? I just let it go and teach me how to take it slow. 'Cause baby girl, I'm so wrapped up in all your wishes, and you know this humble heart you're holding